Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 164. And this week, I am happy to say we have a very special guest in Morgoth. So how are you going?
I'm doing very well, thanks. Thanks for inviting me on.
If I didn't do that, it wouldn't do me.
How about Mitch? How are you feeling
How are you
today?
going, Mr. Morgoth, this evening?
I'm doing very well. I'm a bit cold, like I'm waiting for spring to kick in, but I'm doing very well. Thanks for inviting us on. Am I coming through okay?
I can hear you okay. Duke?
Yeah, same.
Yeah, no, it's all right. That was me doing boomerisms. Don't worry, guys. Sorry about that to the chat. So we are ready to kick off, and as usual, I'm going to ask, I guess, if they have a first subject to bring up, and as he's a special guest, I'm of course going to start with Morgoth. So Morgoth, did you have a first subject you wanted to bring up this evening?
Well, I was going to talk about what's happened in Russia, but I see we've got a specialist on, so I thought I'd switch it to the situation with Kate Middleton, because I've become, as like the days have gone on, I've got more and more irritated with the kind of don't believe anything is real sort of takes on it. Like I actually do think that some of those pictures were faked, and it was like. What happened, I thought, was that people when like there's this thing where there's different things, there's different sort of conspiracy narratives which you can jump in on because Kate's gone missing, and there was all these weird things going around about some friend of hers mysteriously shot himself with a gun. There's rumors of William having an affair. There was rumors that William had killed Kate. There was and then there was a promise of an announcement. She hadn't been seen since Christmas. And then you got the first fake photo, and then that like dodgy one that the Sun pushed out. And at that point, I was like, well, all right, this is like normally I wouldn't pay attention to that kind of thing. But then at that point, when the dodgy Sun one came out, I thought, well, yeah, what is going on here? Like, why? Surely, if they want to prove that she's okay and she's out and about, they've got the best photographers in the world. They can do better PR photos. And I kind of looked, I squeezed out a couple of tweets and I looked in on it, and then. She actually did, like, so all the conspiracy people are coming out with all of these things, like, where is she? And the assumption was that she was dead, and then she comes out and she's just sitting on that bench. She's looking a bit, she's looking a bit under the weather, a bit sort of skinny in that. But I thought, well, that's it. And there you go. She showed her face. She's got cancer. She's not very well. Like, that's the end of it. I mean, that, normally that would be drama enough. Like the Princess of Wales looks to be very ill. Like that's a big story in and of itself to sink your teeth in. But and then it's like, no, the people have decided, well, this isn't this is fake as well. You can see, like, because she had a stripy top on, and you can see that there's a reflection in the chair that she's sitting on. And then the Sun did a one. The Sun took that photo and they kind of dolled it up a bit, and they made it look like she was in better health and it was better lighting and all the rest of it. And then it became, look, it's more fake. And I thought, that's just marketing. If you look at how the British tabloids are presented, it's that when you walk in a supermarket, they'll just be sitting there. And what they want is they want it to catch your eye. That's why they've made that happen. If they just made it look like this 40-odd-year-old woman sitting on a chair looking miserable, like that's not good for putting on the front page of a newspaper, unless you went all in on the, like, this is the end of Kate kind of thing. And I just began to get more and more irritated by and I think it's interesting. There's this flat refusal to believe what's out in front of them. And then at the same time, you see that they had these. There's another side of it where the people will say, "Well, it's the vax," because she was pushing the vax, and now this is like, was it turbo cancers or something that everybody's talking about? And I mean, I don't even know. I don't know if that's true or not. But you see, they had like different options of conspiracy to go with, and it was like once people had doubled down on the fake AI stuff, then they couldn't then backtrack and go down the vax narrative. And I just think it's a kind of, it's like a symbol of where we are, where social media, like what do they used to call it, the information superhighway, and I just think it's clogged up and full of junk that nobody's actually traveling along the highway anymore. The information just gets stuck on the highway in traffic jams. So that's kind of me basic take on the Kate situation. Like, if somebody else wants to jump in.
Well, yeah, I mean, like back in the day, the burden of proof was pretty low. It's, oh, is there a photo of it? Is there a video? Fine. And now, you know, especially with the AI, it's given a lot of people room for skepticism. And I suppose for a lot of people, they can really run away with that stuff. I mean, generally the internet just doesn't work at all nowadays because there's so much SEO content out there. You know, I think I've seen people doing these tricks where they say like, oh, you can get Google to work by making it search for results like prior to like 2019 and stuff like that. But yeah, like it's kind of funny how I mean TikTok seems to act as like a nitrous for this, for the conspiracy circles. I don't know quite what it is about it, if it's something weird with their algorithm or if it's just the way that platform works and then the way people can get content out there. But it is quite funny. Like, I was really trying to not have any interest in that Kate Middleton story for ages, and there was like a point, like a week before she released that video, where even I was like, hang on a minute, there is actually something going on here. And then of course it comes out that it's something quite mundane, but people are still going with it. It is a funny old thing. I'm not really sure still to this day what to make of it.
It does make you wonder, though.
What was going? The bigger issue. I mean, obviously the channel.
Oh,
sorry.
Don't worry.
I was going to say, it does sort of beg the question: what was going on with the House of Windsor sort of PR team, like the royal PR team, because the what really fueled the, I guess you could say, the absolute sort of some of the normal sort of wacky out there conspiracy theories on this was that whole AI photo of the family, and because they would have known the number of interest around there is a question of whether it's just incompetence or whether if there was actually some sort of purpose to this. I mean, I looking at it as a whole, I think it might just be layer upon layer of incompetence that is that culminates into this whole, this whole story that's emerged from all this, like the conspiracy aspect. But the fact that they allowed an artificial, like an AI generated photo in the first place to go out there, knowing full well that there are people out there who obsess over the royal family, and could easily, as they did, determine that it was not a real photo in that sense, and that it was completely overlooked.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I think the bigger issue is as Mitch and Morgoth and I were talking about before we went live, is that these days with AI, and particularly with the sort of level of AI which is available to governments and government agencies and what have you, you just literally can never really tell what's real and what isn't.
Yeah, I mean, I've got I downloaded a it's actually quite fascinating how accurate it is now, that the AI, not just in video, like photo, but video format and audio. And there's I don't know if you guys seen it at all. I've seen it on like Twitter a few times where I've downloaded it, where you've got this AI creation of Emma Watson dressed up in a in an SS uniform reading the entire volume of Mein Kampf.
Yeah, it's easy to do that sort of thing today, even for people like ourselves.
Yeah.
And if we can do that, imagine what, you know, MI5, MI6, CIA, FBI, imagine what those guys can do. So, you know.
I think you'd be probably quite surprised at how crummy they are with some of that new tech stuff, but yeah, still.
I mean, does anybody believe it was actually Kate sitting behind the computer? Because that was the story, that Kate she's into Photoshop, and that was she's sitting there with, what is it, bowel cancer or something, and then she's just gonna sort of make memes of her and the kids, and then put a shit posted on social media. It just
monster in the palace.
Yeah, Kate's a secret shit poster.
It sounds unlikely. I mean, how difficult would it be for them to just have taken a photograph with, you know, with her husband and her kids? I mean, you know, wouldn't it be?
I mean, it's probably some researcher at the palace who was probably given the task, and you know, I mean, who knows what went on and what decision. I mean, the thing is, official photos to go out have to go through several channels of approval, right? So it would have been approved all the way. It could be that they're not tech savvy on that level, and so somebody edited the photos around to make it look, you know. I mean, actually, on the question, because I'm not certain about that family photo. Is it entirely fake, or is there elements to it which are true, and it's just they made Kate look less, you know, less skinny and pale? Is that what they did to it?
I don't pretend to know, mate.
What I saw was what I saw was that the Kate herself there's a way to detect what's been sort of photoshopped in. I think it was Photoshop rather than like an AI thing. And it was that Kate herself had been photoshopped in to like an older photo of the kids or something like that. And there's a way you can do it. I think then you do run it through AI or whatever. And what I saw was a sort of like a yellow figure, like a yellow silhouette. And that was exactly what Kate was. But I mean, I'm not a specialist on this kind of stuff.
No,
it would have faked me unless everybody on Twitter wasn't pointing it out.
Yeah, I know people are pointing out that the fingers on the children and William were a bit off, and I know that AI generated images have this weird habit of giving like, you know, extra fingers on the person or something like that. So
I think like there's the palace. I think the people at the palace probably just aren't as adept at this, and then when they get themselves into a lot of trouble, because they may probably reluctant to get in touch with the government. And of course, if they got in touch with the government, there'd be all kinds of specialists where you just wouldn't be able to detect it. Like they'd be on the ball. But I think a lot of the people at the palace are like AI says, are just kind of incompetent and not used to this. And so they're getting caught out because they're behind on where the technology is and how they have to use it. And I mean, even the picture looked a bit like sort of obvious, you know, it was just this, it was like happy times. Everything's fine, everything's peak, but you see, everybody knows that there is something off. Like if you want to send out a picture of Kate just standing in the garden looking a little bit forlorn, that would fit in with her having gone through surgery or whatever. But instead, it was like nothing's going on, everything's fine. But everybody knew she'd been disappeared for like two and a half months or whatever it was, 81 days or something. So that it was kind of too happy. The context of it was wrong, given that the story that people knew, she'd gone in for surgery, she hadn't been seen since, so she shouldn't be looking like that anyway. So then straight away people are thinking, well, this is a bit off. And then they you know, they start zooming in on it and looking for things. I think that's what happened.
Well, I mean, needless to say, I'm sure I speak for my colleagues here that, you know, the channel wishes Kate all the best. She, whatever your views on the House of Windsor, etc., she seems a nice lady. So, you know, I very much hope that she does get better soon. I think as time goes on, it's as you were saying, Morgoth, earlier, it's going to become increasingly difficult for most of us to really tell what's real and what's fake. It's
I think
just going to become harder and harder.
Part of the problem is that people know the technology exists to fake things. So even if it's above board, even if it's perfectly legit, then because people know that the technology exists, they're always second guessing everything. And this eventually is going to go for, we're talking about photos here, but it'll go for voice, audio as well. So if you look at the picture where she was actually sitting on the bench, like people have doubted that. I mean, that's where I drew the line. I'm going to say, okay, I get it. She's not very well. Here she is. She's setting the record straight because everybody's going crazy. That's where I'm kind of checking out of this drama. But the people who are kind of doubling down on it and then saying, well, this new video of her sitting on the seat with a stripy top on, like this is fake as well. And it sounds kind of ridiculous, but at the back of their minds, they know, especially if the royals have gone to the government or some agency for help, then they do, like, that could well be fake. I'm not saying it is. The problem is it's possible that it could be, because everything could be. And so you enter this kind of weird land, this weird mode where you just don't know what's real and what's fake anymore. I mean, when I've sort of touched on this, people have said that I'm endorsing the actual sort of conspiracy side of it, and I'm not. I'm saying I don't know what's going on. I'll go with what the mainstream narrative is. But what I'm saying is, because people know that the technology exists to do it, it's undermining the authenticity of everything, because everything can be questioned and everybody can have a kind of case to make that it's fake or reason to doubt it just by virtue of the technology existing.
Yeah,
I think this could also be a problem for the elites as well, because I remember, I think it was last year, Tony Blair had this conference somewhere in London, and it was all filmed. It was uploaded to their the Tony Blair Institute it was like Facebook and YouTube page or something like that, and he was basically saying that the problem that you have with AI is that we haven't got it at the moment. We need to harness that technology and that power because it's outside of our reach. And so I do think that this is and I think that, I mean, his ultimate fear in that conference was basically saying, if the other side, and he's not talking about, of course, I don't think he was referring to like Russia so much or Iran. I think he was talking about any potential rivals in the West, because that could cause all sorts of problems for them. And so I think I do think there might be a clampdown on AI technology that would only be available to a certain few. Sorry, go ahead, Morgoth.
There's a meme that goes around, and it's lifted from one of the Metal Gear Solid games, because there's a lot of kind of weird sort of predictions and deep revelations in those games from 20 odd years ago. And one of them, I think it's Metal Gear Solid 2, and the bad guy unveils the secret plan to destroy the internet, and he says we're going to make like intelligence agency level artificial intelligence, and we're just going to make it free to use, everybody, and everybody's just going to fill up the internet with crap. Like nobody will know. It'll become unusable. And then I think this is where the kind of the conspiracy theorists edited it for their own thing. But then they said, like, what you're going to need is a digital sort of thing, like a digital verification and ID to be able to access the internet in the first place. So then what you upload will be immediately traced back to you. So if there's a fake picture of Kate gets uploaded and it goes viral, they'll be able to trace it back to you directly. And I think like that seems to me, if this carries on, because I did a Substack article a year ago, just sort of playing around with this, and it kind of sunk without a trace, and then nothing happened. And now, like this past week or two with the Kate situation, I thought, yeah, like I kind of I was on the ball with that one, because if you're getting to a situation where everybody's got access to AI, everybody can fake everything, how are they going to stop that? And it seems that they're going to have to. It's as if they're creating a problem that they already know what the solution is to it.
I think you also, Morgoth, you've got to look at the various internet bills which are going through Parliament in Britain and in Australia and in the Republic of Ireland, I believe. You've got to look at those things which are going to make it increasingly difficult for those of us who are, shall we say, dissident from the mainstream narrative. It's going to make it increasingly difficult for us to do that. And I'm sure that that will apply to this AI stuff as well.
And it's not without reason as well, from the regime's point of view. If you look at every new, I guess, like new platform that comes on, we talked about TikTok. I mean, TikTok is quite, I would say it's quite awash with, from what I understand of it, it's quite awash with a lot of nationalistic and sort of short bite content. And okay, you can say, you know, the effectiveness of this, but the fact that if it's dominating that sort of space, or it's able to dominate spaces which is relatively speaking new, I think this is why there is a genuine fear. I mean, I don't think it's really a concern. I think it's a genuine fear from within of technology like Midjourney and ChatGPT and all these other AI applications, that it can easily be harnessed and developed by I guess dissident people, dissident figures.
What do we think about the stuff in America with them trying to ban TikTok? What I've seen people saying, like people in our sphere, some of them, is that, you know, they're saying, oh, well, it's to ban TikTok because it's Chinese Communist Party and all the rest of it. But also a lot of people seem to think that the bill that they're looking at will also enable them to crack down on X / Twitter and Elon Musk and all this kind of stuff. I mean, does anyone have opinions on that?
I think I broadly agree with that take. I mean, it's they never cared about TikTok for all this time prior, and there were actually some movements that were actually talking about trying to lobby government to ban it, and there was just no interest from the government, and those movements have actually largely dried up, and now suddenly out of nowhere, the federal government over there has an interest in getting rid of it. It's and yeah, like written into the bill, I think. Yeah, I think the bill is basically implies that they it's not specifically targeted towards TikTok. It basically just gives them power to ban quite a lot of or take liability against firms for quite a lot of content.
I would say, Atman, though, that remember, I think it was last year, you had this. I saw it on the news briefly. Of this viral thing on TikTok where it was a complete was it translation of Bin Laden's letters to America or something along that line, and that it was going, you know, translation into English, and that was like a viral thing on TikTok. So, you know, they're
doing Austrian painter speeches on there now as well, translated into English.
Yeah, and also it's like a lot of the Bowden speeches and or the little sound bites of Bowden's on there. So I think there's probably I think the excuse they'll use is China, and I think the actual reason is probably, you know, there can't be any populist energy of any sort.
Well, I mean, I had my
people. Sorry, I was just going to say a lot of people in the chat are pointing out that one of their concerns is also there's a certain amount of anti-Israel stuff on there as well, which one can certainly believe in the American government.
Yeah, and it's done specifically through the medium of memes and ridicule, which is like the worst kind of propaganda for them to have to fight. yeah, like, I mean, I mean, the funny thing with the Bowden stuff is I obviously had that little Bowden channel on there, Bowden Bomber on TikTok, and there was lots of quite innocuous things I was putting up, and they were just getting instantly taken down with no chance of appeal, like instantly before they'd gotten a single viewer. You know, as if like Bowden's very voice had been written into the algorithm as something to be banned.
How was because I don't know anything about TikTok. I'm too old. I was just going to ask, how is that moderated now? Like, have the ADL got somebody in there, or what? Like, who are the people who moderate? Is it like what Twitter used to be, where it's all these kind of feminists and stuff?
I think it's largely done for algorithm, but they're very shadowy about their sort of proprietary algorithm model. That whatever team they have that like look at, let's say, appeals, it must be absolutely tiny, because it can take weeks for an appeal to be looked at in some instances. So
I would say that I have noticed on there are ways you can get around it. So like a Bowden one, I've noticed people will, instead of using when they're typing out like tags for his name that they have on TikTok, they'll put like instead of like an O, they'll put a 0 or something like that. Something as simple as that usually throws off the scent. But the thing there is, Morgoth, is that it's so people get to, what is it? It's like a repost, so they re-upload the images on re-upload the video, short videos on their own accounts. That by the time they get rid of one, there's like another 100 out there. So it's pointless for them trying to delete, because they delete one, but by then, once it's out there, it's out there.
Right. I see. I mean, I don't, the actual format I don't like at all.
It's very short attention span stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Adam did well with his Bowden Bomber things, because they were just little short clips of Jonathan Bowden doing his talks, but they were short.
Well, I was trying to sort of appeal to the short attention span Zoomer. Sort of get in there where they live, you know.
I see the other one that is on there is like the Goebbels speeches. That's a very popular one in conjunction with Bowden's.
Yeah.
I hate there's a thing with
Mitch,
TikTok.
did you have anything on this? I'm sorry, Morgoth. I was just going to, when Morgoth's finished, Mitch, did you have anything to say about this? Sorry, Morgoth, please carry on.
I was just going to say, like, what the thing that I hate about TikTok videos when I see them floating around on Twitter or whatever is where you get somebody and they're saying something, and they're like, there'll be a headline or something in the background, and they're pointing at it, but their finger's like slightly pointing in the wrong place. And I don't know what it is about Twitch. What is that? Like, they'll point at something in the background, and it's kind of, it looks like it's being really badly photoshopped, and that the person who's speaking is just sort of floating around, pointing at all these things that are popping up behind them. And I don't know. It's just, is that like a really quick way to make a TikTok video? So it just really irritates us when I see that.
Yeah, basically it can have effects where it can cut you out, similar to standing in front of a green screen. But obviously people will do it in all sorts of weird places with weird backgrounds, and it does a kind of shoddy job. So yeah, and I don't know, people on there just seem to have this sort of very feminine urge to constantly be in the shot of whatever it is they're talking about or covering.
I only really became aware of TikTok when we had all the extremely suspicious dancing nurses during the whole China virus nonsense, you know. Like, they were so busy they could do these really complicated dance routines all over the place.
Yeah, and generally speaking, those sorts of videos, when they're done by other accounts in other ways, are not actually that popular. But when the old nurses did them, they were top of everyone's feed.
Very strange, very strange. Mitch, did you have anything you wanted to add on this subject before we move on to something else?
I mean, I don't really get invested in the whole TikTok things. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, which means that, you know, your average retarded Zoomer is still going to find an outlet to just be retarded. Like, they're just going to do that by And also, like, I mean, the only thing is, as I said earlier, like apparently in Spain, the national court there have ordered that Telegram be banned. Apparently, I don't know too much about it. I've only seen like one article shared debate on Telegram, but yeah, that's, and you can imagine that will happen.
Telegram's the one social media I don't use. The Telegram's the one social media I haven't used, so I don't know a great deal about it. Although most of the people I know do use it, but yeah.
Well, it's owned by like a guy who's half Russian, half Ukrainian. I mean, you know, there have been times where they've been pressured to censor before because of Google Play and Apple App Store threatening restrictions if Pavel Durov didn't get rid of certain channels and so on. But like Raj is probably the freest platform you've got. However, there's a lot of talk about banning it because I mean, Telegram's used by pretty much every Russian with a social media presence, and we're always talking about Russian disinformation campaigns through Telegram because I mean, I don't know, it's like someone like me who looks at the Ukraine war, I use TikTok. I can use Twitter, but Telegram will be where it's at because, you know, looking for Russian native speakers on Twitter is hot, like it's like a fun and needle and a stack of needles, to say the least, compared to Telegram. But you can imagine, because you get these groups like I don't know, let's say Nordic Resistance Movement, who are on Telegram, and they'll post a lot on there, or you'll get, I don't know, Rusich in Russia, or I don't know, or you get Patriotic Alternative on Telegram as well, where you can imagine Telegram is in the crosshairs, and I don't know how we'd navigate ourselves around that. Whereas TikTok, I mean, I don't know, like if TikTok gets banned, its spot on the market would just be usurped by Telegram. I mean, not Telegram, by Instagram and YouTube. So
yeah, YouTube have been pushing the shorts thing. Yeah, big time.
I would expect the online harms bill to focus on Telegram straight away, and probably Odyssey before TikTok. When they start to like fire it off, which probably won't be long. I think Telegram will go on first because, as he says, there's a lot of the
I'm expecting after the election in Britain.
Yeah. I don't invest much in I've got a Telegram channel, but I don't do much with it because I just don't think it's going to last, to be honest. I also just don't like the way it works. But yeah.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Look, we're obviously later on, guys, we're going to talk about the terrorist attack in Moscow. So anyone in the chat who's interested in that, certainly we are going to talk about it. But the next, I'm going to just ask Ammon. Ammon, did you have a first subject you wanted to bring up this evening?
No, just this reform story. But I will say on the little TikTok discussion, I've heard news that Rumble wants to buy TikTok. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but I just thought it was quite an interesting.
It's quite interesting, actually. Yeah, it's quite interesting, actually. Well, you were saying about. Sorry, Morgoth, carry on, please.
I was just going to say that France, Rumble blocked France. So if you're in France, you can't watch Rumble.
Oh yeah.
So this is the reason for that was because the French government, there's this thing that they're bringing in the European Union. They're going to be going big on for Elon Musk. And this is kind of like what the online harms bill. I mean, all these things in the West are very similar, where they're going to start and fine companies 5 to 10%. I'm not sure exactly what it is of their overall revenue, if they don't take down whatever it is on there. Like if somebody's got some material on there or a video or it's a political group they don't like or whatever, misinformation, about vaccines or whatever it is, then they're going to put it, let's say the French government would have found something on Rumble and they would say, well, you're going to get fined unless you take that down. So it puts the person, the company in this case, or an ex, it'll be Elon Musk himself or the ex as a company, they have to then hand over a massive chunk of money or they can't operate there. And so Rumble decided that to cut their losses and just block their French access to Rumble, so that's it. So they don't have to pay any fines. It's just they're just washing their hands of France. And so the question then happens: what happens when this same thing is done with? Well, the online harms bill will do this, and I would expect a company like Odyssey to do the same. Say, well, it's just not worth it. So we're going to just say kind of not be in Britain anymore. But the problem with X is that obviously you've got all the bureaucrats in the European Union, for instance, they're actually on X. They use it. Like this is something that the elites themselves use. So the situation then would be that the European Union blocks X, or X blocks access in the European Union so that he doesn't have to pay the fines, or he just gives up on the whole free speech thing and then starts to censor. Like that's the other option, of course. But potentially, and given that it's Elon Musk and he's kind of like, his whole thing is free speech, it puts him in a bit of a difficult situation unless they change the laws in some way. Because one of the things he said, especially with the Irish hate speech laws coming in, is that he allows free speech within the law of the country where it is. And I've been reported on Twitter loads of times since I got the account back, and all of the reports came from Germany for some reason, like every single one of them. And I don't know if that's like automated or what it is, but that was a thing. But eventually, like, it'll be where there has to be either he backs down on the free speech and starts to censor people, or pays the fines, which would just be ruinous in the long term, or the European Union blocks X, or he blocks the European Union. But Twitter's got more users in the European Union than in America, I think. So it's I don't know how that will go.
I think
with the Germany thing, I think that. Sorry, I was just going to say, the thing is that Australia is passing a very similar law to the online harms bill. The Republic of Ireland is, as Morgoth just said. So, eventually you're going to have people like Elon Musk and X. They'll be able to operate probably in the US, but will they be able to operate anywhere else?
Yeah, I think with the German thing, I think the reason for the German notification is because I think they have to say if the report is from Germany, whereas for other places they don't have to divulge it because of the way that the German law on this works. But
right.
I noticed someone earlier in chat as well brought up the new Scottish law that they're bringing in. I mean, that one's kind of particularly insidious because that law, I don't know how this is going to affect people in our sphere or more widely, but if something can be read in Scotland, they are considering it published in Scotland, which basically means everything on the internet. And of course, they're not going to be able to use that law to punish someone posting to Twitter from, China, or wherever. But they could, that could affect someone posting to Twitter from England, or posting to YouTube from England, or from Wales, or I suppose even Northern Ireland. So there's some there's some potentially pretty strong ramifications to that, and I'm not sure if they thought this through or how this is going to affect people going forward, or how it's going to be exercised. And it's a pretty worrying precedent they're putting forward.
Well, I mean, that sounds unenforceable, though. I mean,
Yeah.
how would they enforce it?
I know that there were some people. There was one person in particular in our sphere who I think made a tweet or something in Scotland, but then they moved out of Scotland, and the Scottish police got a police force locally in England to essentially pursue them on this. I don't think it ended up coming down to anything, though.
Something that I've noticed is that the smaller, like, home countries, and then Ireland, I'm going to clearly make that distinction before I get in trouble. These smaller countries, they're bringing in all of these laws, but I think they're kind of crap at it. Like I think if you have a look, I did an article about this, but if you have a look at the way Ireland behaves with its immigration policies, with like they literally just rammed in all of the immigrants and then simultaneously also the hate speech laws. And I feel like and you see it with Scotland as well, where that they want to be good little sort of global homo slaves. They want to stamp out populism and nationalism and all the rest of it as usual, but they're just kind of ham-fisted and stupid with it. And so you always end up getting these like unbelievably draconian laws which are like hard to enforce. Whereas I think when you look at who like London and the British sort of deep state and intelligence agencies, they're much more professional. Like they're much smarter at how they do all of this. But the outcome is actually worse. Because in the situation like Ireland, you get the whole like look what they did with that referendum just last week, where the government was just, and then Varadkar had to resign. Like the government's just made it look kind of clownish and stupid all of the time. I mean, so is ours, but I just feel like there's a bit more experience in London at dealing with these situations, and in like Scotland or Ireland, it's kind of amateur night. It just looks cack-handed and dumb.
Well, yeah, because a very successful maneuver by the out of London would be you get the population to enforce to the law in place is accepted, and then everyone else enforce like I guess what you would class back in the days political correctness, or not being racist or whatever. You get the masses, the population itself, sort of polices themselves, and it's like like that. What was it? What that part of that Bowden speech where he said he was in the woods with this other chap, and they wanted to say something that was non-politically correct, and he looked around to make sure no one was else was watching them. But yeah, in Ireland, I think in Ireland there is also a point that there has been a culture that Ireland has, or the Irish people probably have enjoyed more latitude than any other white Western group. And that sort of legacy of a sort of latitude is not easily put away by the global homo. It may be put away, I don't know, but given the responses that we've seen, like with that riot a few months ago, in response to that attack.
If you look at how they brought the hate speech laws in, but Blair brought the hate speech laws in Britain in, I think it was like the mid 2000s, and that was actually pitched to the right of the political spectrum, because the idea was the way we've got all of these mad mullahs, as the son would say. You've got all these Muslims that are coming out with crazy things in the mosques. We're going to have to shut them down, and so it was like red meat for the right. Not the left, the right of the political spectrum, and a lot of people jumped on board with that. And so it was kind of like, well, yeah, we're going to show them. They're not going to come over here and say all of this stuff in these mosques about us and everywhere. And then just a few years later, you realize that actually everybody put the nooses around their own necks because they come on after us. And so here you see the kind of the much smarter play there, compared to in Ireland, where it's like they're busy shipping them in. It's like on the Roadrunner when like Wile E. Coyote's laying down the train tracks in front of them as the train's coming up behind them. That's the kind of thing. They're laying down these hate speech laws like right as they're bringing in, like blatantly to shut people up about the immigration policies.
I mean, do we think that Ireland is going too fast about it though? Because I think there is I think you could say in Britain's case, it was the laws were passed and then it was a gradual. I mean, it has accelerated though in this country in the last 10 years, obviously, but that I think it does appear that Ireland is going at a rate of knots with this, and do we think that this was sustainable for Ireland, because I just don't think they could pull it off if they're trying to catch up, say, with the UK and other Western countries in Europe.
Yeah, I'd
They
say
don't need to.
so.
They don't need to, because Ireland's got such a small population. I mean, what is it, 4.5, 5 million, something like that?
Well, yeah, but on the assumption that let's say Dublin, Cork, Munster, places like the major cities in Ireland become majority non-Irish, because at the moment it's still even Dublin, it's still majority Irish, right? So what I'm saying is you're looking at a point where all the cities are basically carbon copies of London, and it's starting to filter down into provincial towns.
So what you're saying is they're
And
boiling the frog too quickly.
yeah, basically, put it like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say
Yeah,
that's the
maybe
same as
so.
well.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. It's interesting to see, actually.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's very true. Look, I think we should move on to our next subject. And I'm going to ask Alan to start this one off, because obviously what we've seen this week is we've had Reform UK, who are supposedly looking to make themselves a replacement for the so-called Conservative Party, in air quotes, because they don't conserve anything, dropping candidates left, right and centre because Hope Not Hate, which is an extreme left-wing non-governmental agency, has told them to. Obviously, I think that's a British story that we need to cover. Adam, would you like to start us off on that one and what you think about it?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, it's kind of funny as well, because it's like, I don't think it's every member, but Hope Not Hate, enormous amount of their staff seem to be members of the Communist Party of Great Britain. It's kind of a bit ironic that the Communist Party is vetting members for other parties, especially the Conservatives. They now seem to be doing this for Reform. I was trying to actually put a list together of the Reform candidates that have basically had to step down due to campaigning by Hope Not Hate and people in their periphery. I don't think a list for this exists, sadly. But obviously we had Bo Day to the Lotus Eaters was a big one. I think people have been talking about. We did also have there was this like older lady who's like a proper paid up like Boomer Waffen member called Gina H. Ball. She was Reform essentially kicked her out over this. There was another guy I think called Roger Ho. There was another figure. I saved a tab of it somewhere, but I can't find it now. But there was a guy, like, they seem to have moved on. They started first by saying it was due to like racist comments. They now seem to be like going after Reform candidates who are like anti-net zero was one of them. I don't see how Reform's going to have any candidates to run left after all of this. Maybe they'll have to take that election pledge with the Tories then, I suppose. But it's I don't really know what to make of it. It's just par for the course at this point. They seem dedicated to make sure that Reform doesn't have any new blood, that it just ends up being a sort of creche for Tory retirees, who flee from that party, or maybe they just want to chase them back into the Tory party.
It just looks like a lifeboat.
It
It just looks like a lifeboat for like Conservatives who are leaving the sinking ship like rats at the moment. What's the point of voting for Conservative Party Mark II? Because the whole point is we need to break this Labour Conservative uni-party system. And it's becoming increasingly obvious that Reform UK is not interested in that. I mean, they won't speak, for example, about the flood of legal mass immigration, which is destroying Britain. They won't even speak
It's like,
about
I think, did you catch that Twitter space that the Homeland Party did?
last night with Alex Cave and some of the
Yeah.
others. Yeah.
Yeah, I caught that. Yeah.
It's like because I made a point that in a way, pragmatically, we could end up supporting Reform just to make sure we replace the Tories, because let's face it, if Reform were to be in a position where they're in second place while Tories are gone, it's just a position where, okay, well, Reform a lot like we Homeland Party, for example, would never fear Reform because it's just too weak. But the same mandates also, well, it's like you're seeing Reform poll at something like 15% last I saw. I don't know if it's going to stay around that or go down as a result of the news, but let's say it stays around there and Reform let's say they become like even just like third biggest party, despite all of the cooking they're doing lately. I'd say it's one of those things where at the end of the day, like, it's still breaking the mold. Like, you're still smashing the brick in the wall, even if it's not nothing more than what feels like a plastic hammer. For one of the best.
You do have to be. You do have to be careful though with that, because let's just say that happens after general election. All that would happen, and on the assumption the Tories go down to like the Canadian Tory Conservatives in the 90s when they went down to 3 seats, you could have this scenario where the entire Tory party apparatus literally just go to the backup car, which is Reform, and we still have the Tory party existing, it just with a different name and different different colours to its mast, and the problem is because number one, the Tory party is kind of like Mace Windu and Darth Sidious, where he says it's too dangerous to be left to be left alive, and there is a truth to that. You have to you can't really allow the Tories to regroup on this. If you have to kill the party, you kind of have to kill all aspects and adjacent sort of alliances with it. It has to be a total destruction.
Absolutely, and salt the earth where it was as well. It is like that. It's too dangerous to be left alive. You got to kill it and burn all the ashes, then put the ashes in concrete and throw it in the sea. I mean, I hate. I never paid much attention to Reform. It didn't really light my fire. But just on the issue of the cooking thing, like. I think it's interesting because what I really was paying attention. I know they bounced Steve Laws. I think I don't know who the other ones were, but I did pay attention when it was History Bro and also Dan from the Lotus Eaters, because I thought here you've got like sort of the Sargon and his crew, which have got a bit of punch because that's kind of their base. They could funnel a lot of energy to them. They could get on board. And they have deliberately spat in their faces. And what's worse is that I think like it's worth considering a little bit of political pragmatism, because I can understand that if you've got somebody who's coming out with really extreme stuff on Twitter in this day and age and they've joined your party, you might want to pull them into the back and say, look, clean your Twitter up, or it's already too late. The screenshots have been taken. Yeah, you're out. You're getting binned. I kind of understand that because it's just a matter of political pragmatism. If they had made those decisions themselves over their own party, but what's actually happened is that Hope Not Hate made the decisions for them, and like within an hour. They got the binned History Bro. Within it just looked terrible, because then you think, well, really they're just a dog on a leash. This is just absolutely pathetic. And again, like it's not to say you let people fed post, you let people, you can't have that. Like I get it, you can't. You've got to have some kind of optics is a thing when you're running a political party. So yeah, fair enough. Like have a quiet word. Boot somebody out because you and the upper echelons of the party have decided he's a liability. Fair enough. That can happen. But don't publicly and obviously allow Hope Not Hate to vet your members and then regulate your party. That's just a shit show. I mean, that's just an embarrassment.
Yeah, and of course that's what's led to I mean, that's what's led to them now, like Hope Not Hate, calling for all sorts of people to be deplatformed from these parties for all sorts of things, because they've tasted that little bit of blood in the water. They've actually got influence now. Well, I mean, they've always had too much influence, but and now they're going after these people. It's a sad state of affairs. I mean, maybe in another timeline there was an opportunity where reform was kind of a pragmatic thing to leave around as a way of keeping your powder dry, but now it's just you can just see it's just another enemy rising up, and it's they also need to be given 0 seats.
Yeah, but it's why I hate Richard Tice a lot more than Rishi Sunak.
I always dislike Tice, I've got to say, but like I've streamed with History Bro, with Daughter of Albion a very long time ago now, on a stream about the Battle of Trafalgar. And History Bro is in no real sense an extremist. He just isn't, you know. He's a nice chap.
Yeah. I mean, friends who I've gotten into listen to the Lotus Eaters actually think he's the milquetoast one of the bunch.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair though, his whole, I mean, I do like his content on history. He's a very knowledgeable chap on history, and that's just his thing. He talks about history, and he has all his episodes on history, which is very informative. I mean, I would say what is quite ironic though with the Lotus Eaters and Reform is that on Reform's website they describe themselves as classical liberals, and I think it is safe to say that Carl back in the day was very much at the forefront of the the liberalists, whatever they called themselves then, and the whole classical liberal sort of scene. And it as I go back to go back to Bowden, liberalism is moral syphilis, and the thing there is, if you swim within the ocean of liberalism, you're just going to get infection after infection. So
to be fair to Carl, formerly known as Sargon, of course, he's come a long way in recent times. I think he's got a much more realistic attitude about what's really going on with Britain, with mass immigration, etc., than he had even 18 months ago.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not. I'm just. It's just that I find it rather in some ways just ironic that one of him and his team that created and sort of centered around the classical liberal have sort of been.
But I mean, Dan also
taken
got ditched. Dan's another one of his dudes who I like, and he also got ditched by Reform, I believe.
Well, yes, and same thing. It's Reform has copied a lot of Carl's dialectics and from his channels and throughout the years, and there's been they've definitely caught, and they've sort of thrown them away under the bus, and the communists have as you said have been in good old sort of historical fashion, the liberals get taken out by the communists.
Well, I mean, Richard Tice was interviewed on the Lotus Eaters. On I think it was actually Baudet that interviewed it as well.
He wanted the reach.
Yeah.
I would say that there is that. I think what angers, I think the main anger that a lot of people have felt, even people who aren't so much emotionally connected to Reform or the story in any way, is that there is an obvious level of betrayal. And in this country, we're not as like Skull-Douglas as like the Italians or what have you, where they sort of revel in sort of intrigue and betrayal and all that sort of stuff. In this country, it's not normal, it's not common, and there is nobody likes that sort of behavior here. And
I'm of the opinion the only thing that might save Reform is if Farage came back and took over leadership of it. If he did that, certainly with the normie public, that might actually turn things around. But under Tice,
no. Well, see, Iron Duke could help you more than that. He would have to punish Tice. He would actively have to publicly, literally drag him out into the market square, and well, you get the idea. But
he would absolutely, he would, and also he would have to publicly speak about legal mass immigration, which is the real issue. You know, everyone goes on about these small boats, and these small boats, don't get me wrong, are obviously very, very bad. And the British government has no intention or interest in stopping them. But the real issue is the legal immigration.
But you can't remove Tice from the Reform Party, because he's made himself into an integral piece of its mechanisms. He can't be removed. You'd have to essentially walk away and build another new party. You
don't think that Farage could replace him?
No, because Tice is like he's the CEO of the party, but he also the party has lots of his money tied up inside of it, which is part of an actual operating financial deal.
But if we're absolutely honest, though, people would vote for Farage. They wouldn't vote. I mean, he could just create another party in on himself, and he'd still get 15%, probably currently 15-20% of the vote easily.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I mean, but I just, look, I've always been disappointed in Farage, because after Brexit, he had an opportunity to turn the Brexit party into something else, and instead of doing that, he walked away. And he didn't only walk away; he recommended a really bad person to replace himself. So,
Well, wasn't it UKIP that sort of snuffed out the sort of there were other things going behind the scenes, I'm aware, but it was very much UKIP that sort of replaced the BNP
to some degree,
back in the day.
I kind of think that's quite an optimistic view of the UKIP and their strength at the time, but this is something where Farage has said this before, and for a long time I just used to think it was Farage like being a boomer, right, and falling back into that state of mind, and essentially using a cheap tactic to get the thinking he would get the journalist office back. But I do sometimes wwonder now, especially in light of the recent news with reform.
Well, the only reason I say
it was containment from the start.
But because I do remember the Nick Griffin question time one, because I wasn't actually present in that, but I was in because I went at my parents at the time. They were present in the question time audience, but I was in the sort of
I think we might have lost you there, AI. People in the chat are talking about Carl and how much he is or is not white. As I recall, Carl had a relative from a small British South Atlantic island, where the people that there are, it's still British, by the way, and they're very, they're not black, they were quite mixed race. So any amount of non-white that Carl Benjamin has in him is not very much. I think he was just using that as a talking point when it suited him, to be quite honest.
Sorry, AI, you're back, are you?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I was just saying, referring back to the whole thing, is I do remember quite early on that you had Farage being invited on Have I Got News for You and all the sort of shows and things at the time, compared to, and if you compare it to the BNP, where there was for a while there was media sort of silence, that they wouldn't even acknowledge them in any capacity like they did with UKIP. Okay, yeah, they'd be they would do the usual racism and all that, but it wasn't it wasn't I mean, with the BNP, it was very much just we wouldn't even talk to you. I mean, I remember the controversy around the whole talking to them on question time.
Yeah.
Well, Farage actually came out and said he's proud that he broke the BNP because he sapped away all of the energy. But there was internal problems going on with the BNP at the time, with the members' addresses and private information getting leaked. And I mean, I think these days, it's interesting because these days we're more used to some of the skullduggery that the state will get up to when it comes to dissidents, like genuine ones as well, where they'll mysteriously have bank accounts shut down or this kind of thing. You know, they get the endless sort of tax hassles or whatever it is. And I think in the mid 2000s, the BNP would have been getting a lot of that. They would have been getting people sort of signing up. They changed the law so that you had to have non-white people, or you had to be open to non-white people. And then the danger was that, like, you know, immigrants were just going to flood the BNP and destroy it from within. And I think you had agents working inside of it. And then you had the media blackout, but then the media opened up just to vilify them. And I mean, it's crazy to think that the establishment was on like a kind of war footing against just a genuine nationalist party. And I think well, just, you know, depending on how conspiratorial you want to get to it, Farage came along at just the right moment to sap away whatever energy was left, and then ever since kind of redirect British right-wing sentiment, patriot sentiment into his own thing, whether it was the Brexit, whether it was Brexit Party, and all the rest of it. So, and it looks like he's going to do it again. And the pattern is, like, time and time again, is that there's all of this energy is built up, there's all of this excitement, and then it's just sort of left, it's just sort of imploded and left to rot, and the Tory party will kind of just swagger back in, and that's all, because that's the only game in town again. And it looks like that's what they're going to do this time with the Reform Party.
Yeah,
I would say the only problem with reform is, just think about it, at least UKIP had the direction of like, what was it, leaving the European Union. That was their sole political aim, if you will. But reform, I mean, they haven't got a precise unifying aim that they can unite behind, and so that, I think that does make them weaker than UKIP beforehand.
I think people would be interested. Morgoth, what's your thinking on the next general election in the UK? I mean, I get, because you've said it frequently, and I agree with you, 0 seats for the Conservatives. And, you know, with the current stuff going on with reform, I certainly can't support them. Is there another party that you would support, or are you on the side of saying just
primarily,
what's your view?
Primarily, I just want to see the Tories destroyed. So, but if I went to vote for a party, the one that I actually quite like is the Heritage Party is David Curtin. But here you run straight into a bit of a dilemma because he's not white. And like, it's difficult to shill that. It's difficult to shill that when, you know, when people are going to say, well, you can hardly have a nationalist party when it's a black man in charge of it, which is, yeah, it's a perfectly fair point. I get it. But if you actually look what he says, I never disagree with him. He even did a video where he said the Zionist lobby had approached him and offered him a bit of open a few doors here and there, maybe a bit of cash if he would swing a certain way. I find that in terms of what he's saying, whenever there's something going on, just as a rule of thumb, whenever there's something going on, you know, whatever it happens to be, there's some scandal, there's been a terrorist attack or whatever, there's something in the news cycle, I always find that he's got the most base takes out of all of the little parties. Like, I tend to agree with him more than all of the rest of the parties that are to the right to the Tory party. I think he's I can't what he actually says, I can't fault him on. So it does leave you in a kind of weird dilemma. But I think I doubt they'll be fielding many people. But
funnily enough, Morgoth, I totally agree with you. Like the other guys on the panel will know that I very often put David Curtin's videos up on our Discord. So yeah, I do. I totally agree with him. But also, as you say, I also see the other issue in that the guy is half black. that's a problem. Yeah, I can't fault his takes on stuff. I really can't.
I mean, to be fair, he's had to deal with like the most violent, dysgenic groups of people in the London Assembly, like the real scum of the scum. So probably it's why he's got quite a clear sight on such matters.
Yeah, don't disagree with that. I do have quite a lot of time for Kurt, and I think he seems to be a pretty good dude. But as Morgoth says, you have the issue of the fact that he's not 100% Anglo-Celtic. On the other hand, compared with most of our politicians, he's got the most base takes. He just has. So, you know.
I mean, if I walked into the polling booth, you know, in the northeast, there's not much to choose from, to be honest. But it just so happened that the Heritage Party was there, and then the rest of it was just the usual suspects. I would probably just put the cross in for the Heritage Party and leave it at that.
Homeland seemed to be all right, from what I know of them, which isn't very much.
There have been some concerns about certain members of them being involved in like the BNP membership database leaks back in the day, but I'm not particularly sure if that's really that true. I've signed up anyway, maybe lamb to the slaughter, I don't know. I'm looking forward to working with them and seeing what we can do. They won't be running at this election, though. They'll be running. They'll put a few councillors forward, but they'll mainly be trying to run at the next election.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I think
I do think our major aim's got to be to destroy the Conservatives, because if that doesn't happen, we're never going to get anywhere on the right.
I mean, to be honest, in my area, you only get Labour, Tory, and Lib Dems. So at this round, I'm going to be voting for the Lib Dems.
Yeah, and they're part of the uni party, just as the Greens are. You know, those people are all anti-real British, which, in my opinion, is anti-Anglo-Celtic British. You know, to really be British, you've got to be Anglo-Celtic, at least to some degree.
I might just sketch out a little scene of Rorke's Drift on my ballot paper and then just put that in the box for someone's entertainment.
There's an Aussie YouTuber I follow called The Franklin, who did something very much like that at the last election in Australia. And he put a little cartoon on there.
Punjabi managers, thousands of them.
Thousands.
I mean, where I am above the red wall, I'm in that area. I mean, Blythe's just along the road. And Blythe was Labour for like 70 years, I think it was. Maybe long, 72 years, something like that. And then in the 2019 election, they swung to the Tories because of the kind of the lies, the sort of Boris Johnson leaning in to that patriotic, being a plastic Winston Churchill, and because it was implied with Brexit, that we were going to get our country back and stop the immigration and all the rest of it. So they did it. They finally cracked it. And this year, everybody's just going to, hardly anybody will vote. And if they do, Labour will slip back in. What's mad is that I've actually spoken to a Tory councillor who got in that era. And she was telling me that it was wild to get in, because the way it's strange, because you think of Labour being like sort of peak woke global homo, but in the northeast they were so entrenched, and they had been for so many decades, that it was like really nepotistic, where everybody would just get their aunties and their uncles in, and you know, everybody in the councils was related to everybody else. And this Tory lass was telling me, but she had to report back to Conservative Central situation on the ground. She's saying it's like Game of Thrones. It's like this kind of dynasty where it's like all clans that have been here so long and nobody's ever been able to clean them out. And they'll all be waiting to go, like, just step straight back into all those jobs that they had. They'll be there for another 70 years. And it's just the way the Conservatives just frittered that away. They just pissed all of that away and stabbed him in the back. It's
Well, see,
unbelievable. I hate them.
well, Morgoth, as the other people on our panel know, I was a Tory councillor candidate several years ago now. It's in like the West Country, and what had happened was this Portuguese contingent basically took over the running of the party. And I made the joke saying, "Oh, I know how a Roman Hispanic felt during the start of the 6th century. You know, with like the Visigothic Germanic sort of overallship over the Roman-speaking population." But it's amazing how that how that happened, and you end up having like this, because they came in as like basically part of like the Leave campaign. They sort of got themselves involved with that, and then they sort of wormed their way in through that route. And in the end, it was kind of like they recircled back to being like European again. So it was kind of funny to see how they sort of like wormed their way. And as you said, it was like husbands, brothers, and lots of cousins.
Yeah, I mean, in the Northeast, Labour, they would, because of that, they wouldn't have been as woke as what you might think. I think they were like socially in their values, they would have been like to the right of the Tories that got in. When the Tories got in, it was all about progress. It was all about putting up houses and building new infrastructure. Whereas for the old Labour clan, it was just about kind of staying put and making things ticking over and just not doing much, which looking back on it was not too bad, I suppose. That's just the way it was, and they'll just thoroughly disillusioned. They'll just go back, because for them, it's kind of, they think all the woke stuff is crazy as well. Like you're not dealing with the Owen Jones sort of metropolitan type Labour. It's like the old sort of pit yackers.
Yeah.
So they tend to, like, they'll be drinking in the social clubs where what's left of them, or the odd pub and this kind of thing. And mainly they're just there. They're just there on the grift. They haven't really got an ideology. They're not really there to trans the kids or all of this. Of course, they are limited in how much they could push back against, of course. But it would be like they'd mouth all of the platitudes. They'd nod their head at the right place. They've been trained, not to be racist, not to say the wrong thing about this or that. But secretly, they think it's all crap. They're just there to get their cousins and their brothers into little council jobs, and in Ashington and Blythe and all of this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean the down here in the south, the Conservatives and I will say the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats are interchangeable. A lot of Conservative Party members in the south were members in the of Liberal Democrats. So there's this interchangeability with them, but they actually believe their own bullshit. I mean, they genuinely believe the ideology, to the extent that they will say the most clownish things, and they won't think there's anything wrong with what they're saying. I mean, one of the things I had was on this, like, it was at the start of the whole net zero stuff, or what was it? What was that thing that was a climate emergency, climate crisis? Like councils had the climate emergency funds or whatever. It was something like that, something ridiculous like that. And I remember I just asked, like, I sort of said, well, where's this coming from? What sort of data are you bringing this from? And they were citing that what's her name, AOC in New York, that crazy Hispanic woman with the sort of psycho eyes. Yeah, they were literally quoting word for word her little report. So it just goes to show, there's just nothing there.
I remember where I grew up was in Bermondsey in inner South London, and it was very much like Morgoth was describing the Northeast. Like you could have put a potato up there, and as long as it had a Labour rosette on it, people would have voted for it. And it was like that for scores and scores of years. And eventually some gay Australian dude called Peter Tatchell came around, who you still occasionally hear of, I believe. And he, because it was the time when Labour was getting taken over by all these students and people like that, he managed to get in there and didn't make things better, surprisingly enough. Like the last time I went back to Bermondsey was when my son graduated in the Royal Navy, and I made the mistake of thinking I'd go back and look at my old stomping grounds where I was brought up. And basically it was like I was a foreigner in my own country, because there were no white people there anymore, apart from right on the river where they've got these, what used to be warehouses where people worked, or even I had jobs when I was a teenager, that have now all been turned into very expensive flash flats.
Yeah, it's quite funny that Tatchell will he likes to say that that Scargill's greatest ally back in the day during the strikes was the what's it I guess the LGBT movement as it was then. That was like the sort of like the gays and the Scargill's miners united.
I don't think it even existed back then, really. Did it? Not that I remember.
I don't think it did.
I don't think.
No, but that's his whole thing. It was like a great union of workers and like London gays, like Soho gays or something.
I don't think the old-fashioned Labour dudes that Morgoth was talking about, I don't think they had anything whatsoever to do with people like that. But anyway.
Yeah.
Well, not publicly anyway.
Well, you take my granddad, who worked in a coal mine. Yeah, he would have no time for that, to say the least.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, people often say the northeast, and there's like blunt and direct. I suppose that's more of a coal miner thing more than anything. But like, you get guys like him where I can totally just imagine my granddad being around today. He would just keep using the F word, and he get himself done in prison for hate speech within 5 minutes. If you were to look up State of the Labour Party today,
absolutely, man. Absolutely. I knew years ago an old Scottish miner. I knew an old Scottish miner, and he died in the war, Labour supporter. But like the idea that he would have something to do with LGBTQ is just bloody laughable,
I mean, when I was telling Ian Duke the other day when we were having in messages that when I started drinking in the late 90s, in the social clubs, women were still banned from going to the bars. You would have in the social clubs in the northeast, which were like literally set up by the unions and the local men. You would have the bar, you would have the lounge, and you'd have the concert room. And it was. So what would happen would be the men would go to the bar after work or like on like weekends or especially on a Sunday, they'd all play cards. And I would have to go and get my dad out the bar because he would play cards for his Sunday dinner. And I would have been 12, but I had to go and do that because none of the women, my mother wasn't allowed in. But I was allowed in at 12 years old. And the arrangement was that you would take the wife to the lounge room or they could go in the concert room, but they weren't allowed in the bar. And then I went away, and then in the 2000s I could come back because New Year's Day was great. You just drink. New Year's Eve was kind of wasn't much, but New Year's Day was always a great drink in the club because you'd see everybody you hadn't seen. And then it was then that the rules began to break down and standards dropped, and the women started to slip in. Because you would have a huge do in the concert room, and then there would be people drinking, and there'd be crossover, and all the standards just fell apart. But the reason for that, again, so this was going on. This was literally when Tony Blair was getting brought in that era and for a few years after. But the reason behind it was that it was a male space. And if what would happen is if women got brought into the bar, there'd be a lot of foul language being thrown around. And if that happened to be, if somebody's mother or wife or girlfriend or sister was around that language, it would create an awkward situation. So men would start telling each other to watch the language, and they kind of tone it down. And then other men would resent that because, they were being put in their place, and all of these tensions came up. And so they just banned the women. They were never allowed anyway. It was just a male space, and that was in the late 90s in the Northeast.
I remember more. My father used to take me into the pub when I was like 16, and he'd buy me one light ale, a bowl of light ale, and I think I said, I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't the word. A swear word, but I swore in front of some woman, and my dad just hit me on the back of the head. It was very different back in the day.
Yeah, growing up, we had this. It was. I think it was called like the Imperial Hotel or something, and we'd go over there for Sunday for meals, and you'd have like a bar lounge. You have like your public lounge, and then there'd be like a separate one. And it was a lot of like the old World War II vets as what you had to go there as well, because it was like your military sort of area. So you'd have your vets there and everything. And there was a very strict dress code. I remember it was like proper dinner jackets, the whole works. And again, standards started to slip, because I remember one time there was this chap turned up in jeans. And my grandfather was so incensed by it, he demanded to speak to the manager and say, "You have to chuck this guy out. How dare he comes to this place wearing jeans?"
It was different.
Well, they did a roaring trade. The social clubs did a roaring trade. Sorry, Alaman.
No, carry on, please, Morgoth.
I was just going to say the social clubs did a roaring trade as well. The LCL and the brown ale and all of that. I know of one of them in Wide Open that they bailed out the brewery. It used to be it used to be the case where you would rent your beer, and basically the social clubs were always kind of in hock and struggling to keep up with the breweries. The breweries had leverage over the social clubs, but some of them did such trade that they were able to like sort of reinvest in the breweries themselves, and that's how you got such cheap drink in the social clubs, that they became renowned, where you could go in and get a pint for like £1.10 or 90 pence or whatever. It would be like almost half as cheap as going into the pub. It would 50% of the price or whatever is going into the pub down the road. But all good things must come to an end. They were also prone to getting ripped off because they worked as a committee, and so you would have to have what it would be where you would have, say, 15 men on the committee, and that would be the members of the club would be called in once a year to vote on who they wanted to be on the committee. So once again, everybody was just voting for their dads or brothers or friends, and you got that. It was the same sort of nepotistic tribal clan structure that you got elsewhere. And a lot of the times, like the club would just end up being looted and ripped off. That became more of a thing as the years went by. So these things did happen. It wasn't all perfect, but it was good while it lasted. And if you look at some of the old films, and you see it, and before they banned smoking in pubs and all of that, it was great, man. It was full of life, and it's just. They're all being turned into gyms and flats now.
Was definitely a male space and important, and so were some pubs. They were like, particularly for working class dudes, they were, the equivalent of a men's club, and all destroyed, particularly when they're banned smoking.
I mean, early 2000s. It would also. When did the whole Ladette? Remember the Ladette culture? That sort of.
Oh, that was sort of like
that was
the
similar
noughties,
time.
wasn't it?
Yeah, it was similar sort of time frame. yeah, that sort of all coincided when you had like the sort of breakdown of male spaces, you know. Even then, when I was a child, I never sort of sat right with me, you know.
Look, I've always been very dubious about, you know, you have these TERFs and people like that and the feminist movement, and they're not our allies, because I remember when they were destroying all these male spaces, whether it be social clubs or sporting clubs or pubs or whatever it was. They were all in favour of destroying all those male spaces, and now they expect us to help them because they don't want blokes pretending to be women going into their toilets. And whilst I do agree with them, I particularly agree with them when it comes to young girls, you know, they made their bed. You know, these feminists made their bed.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to tell Varg that, because I don't know if you want to tell Varg that, because I mean he's been buying the Harry Potter series after, like, you don't know if you saw Varg below J.K. Rowling's comment section.
He is a weird character, but yeah, no, the only correct position on the trans woman.
She's a total feminist, except she's a TERF.
Yeah. And she only started caring about
everything else feminists come up with. She agrees with it. She just doesn't like blokes pretending to be women, you know, which is fair enough. Nor do I. But she's not my ally.
But yeah, so like for example, the only correct opinion to have on trans people in sport is it's fine as long as I can bet on them. I want to go to the William Hill and be like, another £10 on the female tennis player with the beard, please.
You're at the cage fight, you know, they're sort of on the side there, and you're thinking, you see the Adam's apple, and you're thinking, oh yeah, all money on that one, please. All the money on that one.
Yeah,
it's weird as well how there's, like, you know, all the controversy about what is it, male to female, or what it is, like basically men in dresses going into women's toilets, and it's that's all where the argument is. But at the same time, we're supposed to believe, well, all this is natural, there's like no difference between any of it. Yet no man, like the reverse is never the case. It's never that men are complaining that Ellen Page is walking into the toilet. You know, it's never the case that there's like a 5'2" woman standing, like, walking into a male toilet in a pub. You know, she's dressed as a man. And like all these men are horrified and outraged about it. Like nobody cares because it's her that's going to be in the vulnerable situation. It's that she's still going to be the one that's walking into the lion's den. It's ridiculous. That's not part of the discourse. It's not part of the discourse that there's all of these men terrified because women dressed up as like little Ellen Page. Will look like that. She just looks so flimsy and pathetic, like a little tomboy. Like no man is going to be scared because she walks into a toilet.
Yep, 100%.
So sort of biology trumps.
Absolutely, 100%. I see people in the chat commenting about assaulted transvestites and what have you. And look, all I can say is I don't have transvestites on this channel, but I don't control other channels. If other channels want to do that, then they can do that, but I don't. So there we go. All right, I think we should move on to the dramatic story of the terrorism in Moscow, and I'm going to ask Mitch to start us off on that because he's our resident expert on things Russian because he speaks Russian. So Mitch, what you've been keeping up with this? What's the latest on that story?
I'll probably just like start doing sort of simple Tom. So on the 7th of March, like you saw the US embassy in Russia saying to all their citizens within Russia, don't go to any public events in the next 48 hours, especially concert halls, funnily enough. And because the thing was, at that very venue which got attacked on the 9th, there was this Russian patriotic singer by the name of Shaman who was meant to perform there. They reckon that the terrorist attack was originally meant to happen on that particular date at that time. to attack his venue at that time because he was a Russian patriot. But for some reason, it got pushed back to another 2 weeks to what happened yesterday. So that's why everyone's suspicious of every Americans having some sort of involvement in all this. I remember like yesterday, it was a simple case of you had 4 blokes who they've all been caught now. They all turned out to be ethnic Tajiks. One of them has a Ukrainian passport, by the name of Rustam Agiev. I believe if I'm pronouncing that right. So that's going to be interesting how Putin and the National Security Council, including Medvedev, will respond to that. You've got there's new footage that came out earlier where it's like we had these 4 guys going to a venue at, I believe, the news broke out at 5:30. Our times to be like 7:30 Russian time in Moscow. That's kind of when you're talking. I reckon the death toll is triple figures at something 140. Last I heard, a few hours back.
Didn't they burn the roof down, Mitch? And apparently, what the Russians are now saying is they deliberately either blocked or burnt the emergency exits.
Yeah, that was why you didn't see people going over the emergency exits. That's probably why they didn't panic in terms of going into the emergency exits, and that's why. But people were largely trapped when you get this footage of people like being huddled into corners beside pillars, just getting shot at, including younger children as young as 7 or 8. I
saw some of the video. Quite disturbing.
Yeah, there's some new footage that came out. Oh, sorry.
So I was going to say, apparently on here, the U.S. National Security Council said it warned Russia of a potential large attack on a large gathering, quote unquote, saying in a concert in Moscow earlier this month. So that's one thing people have been picking up, because that's kind of that's where the idea that America might be behind, might have its tentacles involved in this story somehow.
Well, I mean, the thing is that it's claimed that these guys were somehow connected to ISIS, the Islamic State. And I think it's fairly common knowledge these days that certain factions of ISIS, at least, are connected to American and British intelligence. They are. I think that's fairly common knowledge now.
I mean, it's not just that. You've also got people with ISIS badges on their uniforms fighting in Ukraine on the Ukrainian side, alongside the Chechens or Echkerians, they call themselves, who are fighting on the Ukrainian side. So,
yeah, I was going to say, I would have thought, when I heard the story, I was thinking, the sort of Caucasus, like Islamic Caucasus, sort of various Islamic movements there.
But I've also heard that these guys were heading for the Ukrainian border when the Russians captured them. I'm not sure if the Russians have captured all of them. Wasn't there 6 terrorists, and the Russians have captured 4 of them so far?
Nah, they're put down as 4. They originally arrested 5, but the 5th guy turned out to be a guy who sold them a escape car for like 2 years ago, apparently. So,
right.
Unfortunate. Yeah, so there's 4 guys of him, as I said. All 4 of them are ethnic Tajiks, which they're a pretty big diaspora within Russia. They've got problems integrating all the rest of it. One of them, by the name of Rustam Agiev.
But yeah, they were heading for the Ukrainian border when they were captured. They were heading for the Ukrainian border when they were captured.
Yeah, they were apprehended.
And the other thing I heard is there was a plan then to spirit them away to Turkey or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, they were caught in Bryansk Oblast around 5 to 11, I believe, our time. So it'd be like 5 to 1 Russian time. So like early afternoon, they were caught by, Ramzan Kadyrov on his Telegram is claiming he was a Chechen who caught him, which make about what you will. But yeah, and then one of these suspects one of the guys who got apprehended, they were interrogating in the middle of the woods nearby an intersection of a motorway, and
sorry, mate, you cut out there, Mitch.
did you
cut
catch that?
out there, Mitch?
Yeah, so
you said we got as far as they were interrogating him near a motorway.
Yeah, interrogating in like a stretch of woodland nearby a motorway where they found that like these guys were Churkas. They weren't really massively fluent in Russian, which raises a lot of questions in itself. I'll get to in a bit. But yeah, one of the guys actually in the midst of being interrogated, because emotions were high, one of the guys actually had one of his ears cut off and forced to eat
Yep,
ear.
I saw that, and they tried to feed
Oh,
him.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
they don't mess. The Russian special forces don't mess around, and I don't blame them. I mean, one thing I would say very clearly is that unlike Britain, what you're not going to get Putin and the Russians doing is playing don't look back in anger. That's not going to happen in Russia.
Yeah, but the guys who carried out this attack, they must have surely known that if they were ever captured. I mean, surely, why didn't they just go out shooting or bite the bullet themselves? I mean, that's to let themselves be captured. It's like if I had done something like that, I wouldn't.
But by all accounts, AI, they did it for money.
The thing about them doing it for money, they said like
fanatics, they were doing it for money.
Well, the funny thing about them doing it for the money is, so they said 500,000 rubles, which in our money, that's $5,000.
Oh my goodness me!
So not a great fortune, yeah.
Yeah, no. That's. I mean, you probably get like a cheap second-hand car on 500,000 rubles in Russia. That's how paltry the money is. So, we're not going to expect these four guys to be splitting the atom anytime soon. Let alone.
Yeah, no. I've got to say, look, obviously they were terrified, and I don't blame them because they're all going to be dead sooner rather than later, and rightly so, given the number of civilians they killed, including kids. But none of them seem the brightest tools in the shed. It's got to be said.
Yeah, and one big question that's been asked about is because none of the guys spoke Russian, which was how were they able to get into the country? Because to get a Russian passport, for example, you have to speak Russian. Because I mean, unless they're illegal immigrants, which is probable because Russia's got a problem with Central Asian illegal immigration because they've got a really long border with Kazakhstan. It's similar to the Mexican-American border in some ways, like that. And let's say, and also one of the guys had a Ukrainian passport on him, apparently, which even
Mitch, I don't know if you can see. I don't know if you can see the thing from the chat I just put up, but I definitely have a problem with it.
We don't know, Tim. That's the thing. That's all we know. That we don't know. That's what the four guys are all saying in terms of being interrogated. Now, Central Asians, they're not the brightest tools of the machine. They'll go over to Russia to work construction, and let's say a city like Chelyabinsk or lately these days they're working like building up Mariupol. Where 500,000 rubles you can earn in the space of 3 months doing construction work in Russia. So that just tells you how stupid the amount of money they were doing it for. If that is indeed the case, perhaps we'll know more of the motivations, let's say in a week's time. But I mean, all four guys were saying
very
it
strange. It's very strange.
I haven't really. I don't know if you guys can answer this because I haven't really watched any of this because, like, for the last few weeks, I've seen, like, in Haiti, human barbecues. There's rampant porn on like the site. There's all sorts of like horrific things that you open up on Twitter and I see daily now. So I haven't really paid. But with these terrorists, were they like? How were they kitted out? Was it just like you clashed across going round, or was there? Were they pretty well armed?
I've only seen AKs and stuff like that, but you would expect people in that part of the world to have AKs. Nudge Unit is saying letting themselves be captured alive by the Russians does seem odd for jihadis. But if what they're saying is true, they don't look to be jihadis. They look like they were just doing this for money. And because they were doing this for money and thought they would get away with it, presumably, they're not the brightest tools in the shed. You know, they thought they could kill way over 100 civilians, including women and kids, and somehow they were going to get away.
Well, maybe they were being helped by
like
somebody.
craziness.
I mean, by the sounds of it, I think there's probably that was obviously more to the story, and I think there was somebody else helping them, and they may be patsies. They could be patsies for
Oh,
when they're doing this
obviously,
sort of
yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely right.
I was just going to say, like if we just go with what we're being told, because there's all kinds of theories flying around, and if we just go with the idea that you've got kind of 90 IQ trash like this. I mean, I saw them; it looked like the scum of the earth. To be honest, they were horrible. But let's just say we've and they got paid $5,000. And yes, they didn't really have an ideology. They weren't Islamic fundamentalists. They were just a bunch of scumbags who were willing to do that for $5,000. And the way that was organized, if we believe what we're being told, just the information we've got, was that was organized over Telegram. And I just find that the potential for hazard here to be unbelievable, because I mean, just look at the people the government are allowing in. So all it takes is, it's not an ideological matter, it's not a religious matter. It's just that you find yourself a bunch of shitbags, you give them $5,000 a pop, and then you say, go into this shopping center or theater or whatever it is, airport, train station, mow down as many people as you can for 20 minutes, get out, and the money's yours. That could happen anywhere. Because the assumption is that the people who do that would be motivated by an ideology.
Pretty scary, especially in Britain, where so many people come in who we don't even know.
Yeah, because the way, another thing is that the way these things are monitored would be that we're looking for religious extremists, we're looking for ideological extremists. Well, there's kind of censors which go off if you order certain books online and all of this kind of thing. There's going to be alarm bells ringing somewhere. Everybody's under surveillance all of the time. But in the case where they don't have any of that, they're just in it to get some $5,000. Like it's because it also says that there's people out there, which we on this panel would know anyway, but they've got absolutely no empathy whatsoever. Like, are we to believe that? Yeah, okay, we know it's the case, but that there's just these people walking around. How many? Well, let me put it this way: how many thousands of people in England, in the UK, are like this, where they're not religious fundamentalists, they don't have an ideology, they're just shitbags who, if you gave them $5,000, they would actually go and do something like this in wherever they're told to. Like, how many people are like this in the UK? Well, we don't know, because the government isn't looking for that. The government might be looking for weird, dodgy transactions going on, that kind of thing. But they're looking for people with a motivation. And these people, well, I'll take the $5,000 and do it. It's like what the actual, as you were saying, they're patsies. Yeah, they've got $5,000. Let's just say it was £5,000, and because we're talking about the UK. Yeah, I don't know. I like, from their perspective, like, they're willing pawns in a larger game. Maybe it's to scare the Russian people. Maybe it's sort of there's a wider geopolitical aspect to this somehow. But that doesn't really matter to the people being mown down by these scumbags. You see what I mean? It's a horrifying idea that, well, all of a sudden people like the scum of the earth who are here can just see money appear in their bank accounts, and then they get like a time and a date to go somewhere and do something like this with like, and if you get out, there's a 50-50 chance you'll get out alive. If you get out alive, then the money's yours. And, I'm talking about $5,000. Maybe what happens when it's $50,000? What happens when it's $100,000?
And they gave these guys, Morgoth, apparently they gave these guys half of it up front and the other half they were going to get afterwards.
Yeah. And it's what the terrifying part of it is that there's just no higher motive. They don't care. It's like, yeah, okay, we'll go for it.
Well, if it's those people, if it's just for money, it's much harder, as you're saying, Morgoth, for security services to track people like that. If it's just for money, because what are the red flags you're looking for? You know, oh, he's a scumbag. Will do anything for money. Well, how do you know that? You know, especially as you say, because we don't keep track of the people coming into the country.
I can't help though think back to the start of the Ukraine conflict and how you had coming out, especially out of like America, you had a NATO, you had the constant referencing about trying to, get the Chechens on the western side to open up a front in the Caucasus, and I do wonder if this is like actually an attempt to fabricate or create a Putin will have a crackdown on Islamic extremism, and this could then trigger a response in the Caucasus again, which would then mean that he would have to send the Russian forces down there to deal with another thing. I know there's been several. I know that they constantly want to try and get that region back into the conflict zone again, and it's difficult because Putin's got his
possible.
Yeah, that's a good.
It's
take,
entirely
actually,
possible. It is entirely possible that it is that. Yeah, but it's also entirely possible Ukraine's behind it. And I'd like to think that Britain and America wouldn't really want to kill 100+ civilians, but you know what? I'm so cynical these days that I'm not even sure that's true.
Oh, I think one thing you find as well is like when you look at the West, they will, especially when you look at like Iraq and Syria, and I don't think it's just by sheer incompetence or it's not connected, but it's usually like the Christian communities in those areas are the ones that really get fucked over, to the point where they're sort of wiped out near enough. So
I think it is interesting, and it points out the dangers, another of the dangers of mass immigration. Of course, it does.
But I do think there's a play, and I would say next few months look to see what happens in Chechnya and the Caucasus around there. I think there's something more to this that's more connected, but because there was a terror attack in the 90s, I think, where the Chechens stormed a theater as well and pulled a similar stunt like this.
Yeah, the last time that there was a big terrorist attack.
Yeah.
The last time there was a big terrorist attack in Russia, Putin leveled a bloody city pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in Bestland school. That was actually Bestland school siege back in 2004, where 334 people died, half of whom were children. And the thing was,
I remember that. It was absolutely awful. They were just butchering little children. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, because the thing was, Chechnya has pretty much been conquered. It was a matter of pacifying the land because you have this guy called Shamil Basayev who was roaming around all the mountains of Caucasus and whatnot. So that was kind of like, it was like a guerrilla war rather than like a full-on, rather than like what it was in the early stages of a war where it was more conventional and like destroying Grozny. But like, yeah, it's whereas in the case of this, I mean, the thing is, so the perpetrators, none of them spoke Russian, which generally means they probably were illegal immigrants of some sort. Because I mean, RWA were mentioned in Mr. Matt's stream earlier, where they said Russia's got a big problem with Central Asian immigration, where you just get these guys forming ghettos in cities like Moscow or Chelyabinsk. They have like a lot of like diaspora organizations shilling them like themselves, but also yeah, I mean, Tajikistan, for example, is the poorest country in Central Asia. Plenty of their people will go to work like temporary jobs, like because you got like something like 300,000 Tajiks living in Russia on a permanent basis, whereas you got 700,000 living on like more temporary work contracts, like construction, for example, in Mariupol and so on. And the thing is, the Russians, how can we properly vet all those people? They can't. Now, for example, like Davankov, who was one of the presidential candidates, saying Russia needs to automate a lot more in order to not rely too much on cheap Central Asian labor. But then it's also another thing I was worth noting was so the security guards at that particular venue, they were all killed off within minutes because none of them were armed. Because Russian gun laws are pretty stupid, like very restrictive. Like it's pretty much impossible to get a handgun, for example, unless
I wonder if that
you're a
might
general.
change now. I wonder if that might change now.
I don't know. I mean, there's one. I can't remember the name of it now, but I think it was Nikolai or Kirill from RWA. He said, "Oh yeah, there's this gun rights organization akin to the NRA. Even though it's powerful, but you can imagine they'll step up their activism to say, look, we need more. We need better gun rights. We need even if it's just a couple of security guards at that venue were armed, things would have gone very differently. But unfortunately, yeah. So
even if they'd have a couple of armed cops there, for God's sake,
Yeah, they had to wait for these spec ops to arrive, which they arrived within the first half hour, but of course, you got to think of a plan. They've got another layers of the building, so it was like 2 hours into it, I believe, when the spec ops forces, like the Solbra, as they're called, were deployed into the building. Then it was like a few hours later, like we didn't know what was happening. It turned out they made good their escape in the car by dumping their weapons in the place and blending in with the civilians because they were all wearing civilian clothes and they weren't wearing anything to distinguish themselves. So they were able to get into their car, which they didn't change a number plate. Oddly enough, you'd think they would have done some of those basics of that to make sure they weren't tracked or anything. But yeah, they didn't even getting to use a second getaway vehicle. So on one hand, you say very premeditated, but also it just seems quite amateur as well. So I don't know what to fully make of it. I mean, I won't be surprised if the SBU have some hand in it, because as I said, like one of the perpetrators had a Ukrainian passport. That's one problem you've got.
And SBU for people in the chat is the Ukrainian secret police, basically.
I don't want to bring the chat down and sort of into this sort of level, but I would actually just say, and someone I just seen it on Twitter, and again this is just sort of how ridiculous it is if you think about it in this sort of way. Is that over 10 years ago you had that Call of Duty game, and you have that mission, what's it called, No Russian, where I
know, I've seen that on Twitter.
Yeah, you've seen that on Twitter. Yeah. So like this entire story is basically No Russian, and in that Call of Duty game, it's either they go in the airport and they massacre Russian civilians to try and trigger a war with the US, Russia to attack the US, and the guy involved with it is like a CIA operative. I do wonder if they actually are just they just do look like they just leave messages or something in like
Maybe.
Because it's just again it's just weird that this whole story's weird.
Adam, any comments on this?
No, actually, I'll be honest. This is quite far out of my wheelhouse.
Well, I think the truth is we'll probably get more information, as Mitch said, over the next week.
Yeah, but like as we started with the whole conversation off at the beginning of the stream, how much can you actually believe nowadays? Like, we can hear lots of statements from various people and all sorts, but it's still going to bounce around. People are going to be very unsure what to actually take away from this. It'll be probably one of those things that we will only really start to understand sort of 40 years from now.
Maybe, yeah, maybe. Look, I just feel really sorry because the people who were killed were like civilians, and including like many women and children and stuff. So I mean, that's obviously a bad idea. And we condemn all violence.
I mean,
on this channel.
it did seem particularly grotesque of an attack. I don't know if the services on the ground were also just a little slow to respond, because I suppose they're not quite as used to this as we are here in the West. We've sort of fine-tuned our sort of response to terrorism, as grim as that is. But I mean, they've had trouble, of course, because this is because of the Chechens, because of the war and various other things. But it's a big attack. It's a substantial attack. It's quite horrific, really.
And Putin.
Sorry, carry on, Morgoth.
I was just going to say, I mean, I saw Putin's response, and he was squarely blaming it on Ukraine. He was kind of he seemed to be going in that direction. And I'm just looking at what's on the trends on Twitter. It's got the CIA and false flag and the usual stuff. So there's definitely a narrative taking hold that, whether it's true or not, I mean, we don't know. But there's definitely a narrative taking hold that in the end, like, this is the Americans. The Americans are involved with this in some way. Could be complete garbage or not, but here we go again. Like, it's like what we were talking about, as Ataman was saying, where all of a sudden it's the Kate Winslet's problem again, but this time honestly involving like Russia. And 140 to 50 dead civilians in Moscow. And it's like, well, who's going to take the fall for this? Because everybody's got their own geopolitical sort of incentive to blame somebody else. And in the end, like, what happens if it becomes with millions of people within the West, but then also with the Russian leadership themselves, where it becomes a thing that the Americans organize this for whatever reason. It's a terrible scenario because then it justifies, like, the obvious thing that people are saying is that they'll just go ape shit in Ukraine now or whatever. But it's like the truth hardly even matters because everybody's got their own narrative. If it turns out to be a Central Asian sort of terror group, which has got nothing whatsoever to do with the West, like that seems like the best scenario. But I think what AI was saying earlier is a fair play, because if you look at the wider sort of problems that we've got, you had where the Americans were all in on the Ukraine front. And then you got all hell breaking loose with Israel and Palestine. And the Americans had to divert a lot of attention over there. And then there's a possible third theater in the Pacific with China. So the problem that the Americans have got is that they're getting this situation where they're just really overstretched, whereas Russia only really has to focus on the Ukraine situation. So stirring up a hornet's nest for them at their underbelly would be like, I can see the logic in that. It's cold and it's brutal, but I can definitely see that the logic in that.
I would just say, look, Ukraine has done terrorism in Russia already. I mean, they blew up Dugin's daughter and stuff like that, and they've done other terrorist attacks in Russia. I would, if I was a Russian, which of course I'm not, but if I was, I would be inclined to look at Ukraine first for obvious reasons. And could the SBU be involved in this, the Ukrainian secret police? Yeah, of course they could. Very likely. Like I say, I would hope that Britain and America wouldn't do something that was going to kill a load of women and children. But you know what? Don't think I can even trust them that far these days. And when I say Britain and America, of course I am talking about the regimes in charge, not the actual people. But if we're going to find out about this, it probably ain't going to be for a week or so at least, and as Adam said, maybe longer than that. But I think Morgoth's take that, you know, if you have all these undocumented people arriving in your country, the risk of this kind of thing happening, it gets bigger and bigger all the time. And I did notice, like, all the Ukrainian accounts on Twitter celebrating this, you know, and, like, you know, shooting women and little kids at 6 foot range is not something anyone should celebrate, no matter where they come from. You know, it's just craziness.
Iron Duke, on the topic of Ukrainian accounts, there's this person in chat called Netty, and it's like,
Yeah, I know. I've seen him.
Yeah, it's like the US can easily support Israel and crush Russia's ancient tech. Okay, Netty, what about Afghanistan? How'd that work out? Like,
Or Iraq, really.
I mean, there
But
is truth
yeah,
to the
no,
fact that
it's-
America is going to be the world hegemon for a long time yet. You know, they're possibly past the zenith of their power now, but they're still incredibly powerful.
yeah, but if you look at the way America fights, though, it's basically just long range.
Hang on, guys. Hang on, guys.
Long
Nettie
range.
is saying, "Don't lie. No one is celebrating the attack." Loads of Ukrainian
Let's
accounts
not
on
get
Twitter
caught
and
up
X
on.
were doing that.
No,
Let's not get caught up on one random commenter.
yeah,
But,
fair
yeah.
enough. All right, guys.
I mean,
we've been going over 2 hours. I think it's time to ask if people have things to shill. How Morgoth, is there anything you would like people to look out for on your various social media, etc.?
Well, just be me. I'm on YouTube, Morgoth's Review, and the Morgoth's Review on Substack, where everything I do gets posted. So that's it.
All that stuff will be in the description later on, people. So if you want to go and follow Morgoth, although I'm sure the vast majority of people watching this know Morgoth better than they know me. So there we go. But that will be in the description later on. Adam and Mitch, AI, anything you would like to share?
No, nothing from me. I'm all good.
Mitch?
On my channel next week, I'll be continuing my book series on the mysterious death of the British Empire by Major General Richard Hilton. The chapter we'll be going into with Connor, it will be on the should be on the on British India, the company rule, and then to the Raj, which should be quite interesting one. Will be to look at, and
that's an excellent book. Yep, I've read that book, and it's a good series that AI is doing.
Yeah.
Do go and check it out.
Yeah, I second that as well. I never get to catch them live, but I still be really enjoying them.
Yeah,
it's a good one, and it's available. It's a book which is it's like there's one book, there's one copy somewhere in North America, and there's another copy in Australia somewhere, and that's it. So yeah, I think AA
hard to get, but you can get it as a PDF pretty easily.
Yeah, I think AA. I saw it online, but I think AA got that book.
Yeah, he's cornered the market with that one copy that he bought.
Yeah, that's that one. Yeah, that was the one I saw, and I left it, and I came back, and it was already gone. So, yeah.
But yeah, but you can find a PDF of it pretty easily online if you want to do that.
Yeah, it's on the Discord on the book recommendations.
It's on our Discord. Yeah, I put it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Nettie, no, I'm not going to be doing that. In fact, you can go get timed out. There you go. So anyway, yeah, we'll be back next week with Splendid Isolation number 165. And having had Morgoth on, what I would like to do is get Endeavour on if we can do so. But whether it will be next week or some point in the future, I don't know. Morgoth, of course, is always welcome to join us anytime he feels like. Thank you very much, Morgoth.
Thanks a lot. I've enjoyed it. I'll come back again.
I hope so. It's been a great honour to have you on here, mate. Been following you for a long time, and you're definitely one of the best people in our sphere.
Cheers.
Thank you also to Adam and Mitch and AI for joining us this evening. I would say I had other people who wanted to come on this evening, but you know, even 5 I think is really one too many. I think 4 is ideal for a live stream. And the reason I had Adam and Mitch and AI on is they're the people who basically come on most weeks on this live stream, and we wouldn't have a live stream if they didn't. So there we go. Thank you to people in the chat for joining us. Please like the stream and please do subscribe to the channel. We do also do like history streams and stuff like this, which are worth looking up. And yeah, we'll see you next week, and never let the bastards grind you down.